giving the call to the Assistant Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Albanese Government is delivering the action that Australians rightly expect when it comes to dangerous climate change. It's one of the biggest reasons. It was one of the biggest reasons for the election of the Albanese Government and of this Parliament in its entirety back in 2022. And responding to that expectation, that justified expectation, it was literally the first work that this government got underway with in the second half of 2022. We straight away increased Australia's commitment under the Paris Climate Agreement by more than 50%. We had laboured along in this country for years with pathetic 26 to 28% reduction target by 2030 on 2005 levels. It wasn't informed by the science. The very first thing we did was increase that commitment by more than 50% with only 5 or 6 years to go. We legislated net zero by 2050. We set an ambitious target to achieve 82% renewables by 2030, and we are on track. The member for Brisbane mentioned that we have reached 42% renewables in Australia's grid. What he didn't mention, of course, is that we've only reached that by increasing renewable energy generation by 25% in the first 2 and a bit years of this government. And in support of all of the measures that we took, that the Australian community rightly expects this government to do in tackling dangerous climate change, which is in the best interests of Australians and is an example of Australia at its best as we work cooperatively with the global community, as we work cooperatively with our Pacific family. We have put in place all of the different measures that are required to get us to net zero by 2050, to get us to that 43% reduction target by 2030. We have introduced the Rewiring Australia program, $20 billion to make sure that our grid can accommodate all of that renewable and new storage. We've invested in the Capacity Investment Scheme, which will add 32 gigawatts of renewable energy and storage by 2030 to get to that 82% target. We have a community battery program that's being rolled out around the country. We've got the Solar Sunshot program, the Hydrogen Head Start program, the first ever national electric vehicle strategy that this country has ever had, making sure that our vehicles are cleaner and cheaper to run, that we reduce pollution in addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The first ever national energy performance strategy, only in April this year, with $1.7 billion of supportive programs there to help households, to help local governments, to help small and medium enterprises, with a special focus on social housing improvements, and in making sure that the entire Australian economy, and particularly large emitters, do their work to get us to our 2030 target and to net zero by 2050. Of course, we reformed the safeguard mechanism, which had operated utterly hopelessly under those opposite. They essentially set benchmarks that increased the headroom for all of those large emitters so that they were effectively under no obligation to reduce their emissions. Well, we changed that, and we also moved quickly. The Minister for the Environment moved quickly to reform the EPBC with an expanded and strengthened water trigger. Now, what that does is it means that Australian companies, the large emitters, the 200 large emitters, need to be really serious about achieving the emission reduction that we need, 5% effectively kind of year on year from those 200 large emitters. And that is already beginning to have effect. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy will deliver the 3rd annual climate change statement tomorrow. That's yet another reform that we made in coming to government to ensure that there is visibility, transparency and accountability for the Australian community, so they can look at this parliament, they can look at this government and they can say, we have an expectation that a sensible and responsible and focused and reformist Australian Labor government will take on the biggest challenge that we have before us, responding to dangerous climate change, making sure that this country actually derives all of the very, very significant benefits that lie before us in the form and through the global energy transformation that is occurring because of the comparative advantages that we have. As the member for Brisbane said, the best wind and solar resources in the world, a continent-sized nation with parts of the renewable energy spectrum that we have yet to tap. Under this government, of course, for the first time, we have offshore wind zones, which the coalition never explored. That gives us an opportunity to spread the kind of diurnal range in which renewable energy is supplied, building on the large-scale and household solar that's already been delivered. Added to that, hydropower, new pumped hydro, concentrated solar, battery technology, green hydrogen, all of those things that we are very, very well placed to take advantage of because of the size of the continent, because of the renewable energy resources, because we've got a skilled and educated workforce, because we have a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship right through our economy. That is the work that this government has done, and already in just a bit more than 2 years, the change that Australia voted for, the change that Australians want to see, and particularly young Australians, is becoming real. An increase in renewable energy generation of 25%. We are on track to achieve our 43% emission reduction target by 2030. The Minister for Energy today noted that only the week before last we crossed the 4 million household mark in terms of installed solar PV capacity. We have become the highest penetration solar PV nation in the world, and that started with the former Labor government. When we came to government in 2007, there were only 12,000 households that had solar PV, so effectively 1 in 1,000. Now it is 1 in 3, and in my home state of Western Australia, it is 2 in 5. That is what started under the Rudd-Gillard government. That is what is continuing under the Albanese government, because we know climate change is real, because we know that we need to be part of mitigating the impacts of climate change here for our own sake, but also for the sake of our Pacific family, and to be part of sensible, cooperative global action. The Environment Minister has approved in the term of this government more than 65 renewable projects, and we have the largest pipeline of investment in green hydrogen in the world. And all of those things which people should look at and take heart from, have been delivered in a little bit more than 2.5 years. It is not mission accomplished, as the member for Brisbane says, and we've never ever taken that approach. We've taken the approach that there is no time to waste, and we're going to continue to make positive change when it comes to climate change and the energy transition every single week of this government, every month and every year. We've done that from the very beginning. We've continued that right up until the last month or so, and it will continue over the course of this summer and into next year, when, of course, Australians will have a choice, and the choice is a very, very clear one. Do Australians want this country to be on its best path, to be on the path that suits our best interests and represents our best character? Do they want Australia to continue on the path of sensible, focused, sustained, collaborative, effective climate change action, which we need to make sure that we don't suffer the worst effects of climate change, to make sure that we don't experience those in terms of our environment, in terms of our social and economic well-being, but also to make sure that we don't miss out on all of the many opportunities that are being taken up around the world as the planet goes through an energy transition. We know that there needs to be more renewables and storage. We're already delivering that, and we will continue to see that grow as time goes ahead. We know that as part of the response to climate change, hydrocarbons need to decrease. We know that fossil fuels the days of fossil fuels are numbered as a result of the energy transformation that's occurring. But while we do all of those things in a sensible, responsible, sustained and focused way here in Australia, we'll continue to be a responsible energy partner for countries in our region as they go through their transition in their own way. Think about a country like Singapore, 700 square kilometres, probably just 3 times larger than my electorate of Fremantle, 5 or 6 million people. They're at 5% renewables. They have a challenge to increase their proportion of renewable energy with a country of that landmass. They're making those efforts. They're adding new cables to have the benefit of renewable energy projects in other parts of Southeast Asia, and of course we have a proposal like that to support them as well. But one thing that people need to know, and young people in particular, Australia made a clear choice in the middle of 2022. They said, we don't want to have this science-free, climate change denialist madness to continue. We don't want to suffer the consequences of that. We don't want to miss out on the opportunities that come from a responsible approach to this issue, and they chose this parliament and they chose this Albanese Labor government. And from the very beginning we have acted, and ever since we have made massive and significant changes to ensure that we are on the right track when it comes to emission reduction and we're on the right track when it comes to renewable energy generation.